Hey blushing brides, welcome to Wedding Planning 101. Congrats on your engagement. I am so excited you're here. Today's workshop has 3 parts. I'm going to walk you through basically the entire foundation of your wedding planning process. So this is actually going to be super helpful whether you haven't done anything yet, maybe you just got engaged or you're just starting the planning process, or if you've actually started the planning process already and you've started booking some vendors. No matter where you are, stopping what you're doing and just taking the time to figure out the things that I'm going to go through today will help so much. So before I forget, there are actually a bunch of free worksheets that go along with this workshop. I will link them in the description below. I would pause the video now and go grab those. But basically, this is gonna be all the worksheets that you need to really set the foundation for your wedding. And I'm giving them away totally free just because it's so important to know this stuff for your wedding. Like, if everybody did these little worksheets before they started their wedding planning process, it would probably go a lot better. But every bride I've talked to who has used these worksheets has found them massively valuable. These worksheets are included in my full wedding planning binder as well. So if you are going to get that, that's okay. I would still grab the free worksheets, do the work along with the video, and then you can just add those to your wedding planning binder later on. So those are in the description below. Go grab them right now so that you have them and you can work through them with me as I'm discussing each thing. So what you're going to learn in today's workshop is how to create your wedding vision and theme. So I'm going to walk you through deciding on what your wedding will really look and feel like. It's so important to just know what you want up front so that you're not influenced by other people's opinions or maybe trends or what you see on Instagram. You just can get a clear vision of what you're going for. Every project is so much easier to finish when you know where the finish line is. And then the next thing we'll go through is how to pick a date. Now, some of you may already have your date, which is totally fine. You can skip through that section if you want, or I would suggest watching it anyway because I talk about a lot of things that should be considered when choosing your date. So if you already have your date, you still want to consider those things for your date and take the proper precautions or make the proper plans. So I still recommend it even if you already have selected your date. The last and probably the most important thing I'm going to go through is how to create and allocate your wedding budget. I'm going to walk you through figuring out where the money's coming from, how much money you have to spend, how much it makes sense for you to spend on your wedding, and then also how to break that down by each of the categories so that you have a great foundation to start with and you can actually hit your wedding budget. Most people don't hit their wedding budget, and it's because they're not doing this work beforehand to really get organized and figure out how much they have to spend in each category. So I hope this little workshop is massively helpful to you. If it is, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below. You can also ask questions in the comments below. And then also, if you're not already, be sure that you subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of my upcoming wedding planning videos. I post new videos on all things wedding every single week. So let's start with part 1, the big picture. In this section, I'm going to walk you through making the 7 big wedding planning decisions that you need to make first before you do anything else. Remember, if you have already done other things, that's okay, but you need to pause and do this before you move on. So let's set the theme, the scheme, and the vibe for your big day. So if you haven't gathered already, I'm all about being super intentional in this wedding planning process. So before we dive into all of the details, like what we want it to look like and stuff, I think the most important thing we need to do is decide who we're going to be in this wedding planning process. Being intentional about your mindset about this whole thing is what's going to keep you centered and able to make really great, really clear decisions that are best for you and your partner. If you're not intentional, it's easy to get just chaotic and disorganized and just start spending all sorts of money and not really know what's going on, and it's just going to be kind of a mess and kind of a blur. So how you feel is completely up to you. I know that sounds kind of crazy if you've never heard that before, but how you feel and who you show up as in wedding planning process and in life is a choice, and it's a choice whether you're intentionally making it or not, and intentionally making it makes it a much better outcome. So in real life, you might consider yourself disorganized or indecisive, but we are not bringing those girls to this party. That is not who we're gonna be here. So on your first worksheet, you're going to write down a couple of words of who you wanna show up as in this wedding planning process. Maybe you are super disorganized and you've seen how difficult that can make things. So maybe you write down organized as one of the things that you are going to show up as in this wedding planning process. You can deal with the rest of your life afterwards. Another word you might choose is decisive. Being able to look inside and know what you want and being able to make choices from that place and to clearly and quickly make the right choices is a huge skill that is going to come in handy, especially if you consider yourself somebody who might not be that necessarily in your everyday life. Strong, just being able to stick to your decisions and not be swayed. Mindful, maybe you want to be very present and mindful and intentional about how you're making these decisions, and also enjoying the process as you go. I feel like it can be so overwhelming and stuff that this whole process can just fly by in a flash and you don't even really remember it, you don't really know what happened if you're not being mindful and intentional about being present and enjoying it. And same with your wedding day. I've seen so many brides spend so much money on their wedding day and then they don't even remember it because they didn't set the intention to be mindful and to be present on their big day. Maybe you want to be more heart-centered. Maybe you don't want to feel the pressure of needing to look good for social media. You want to be heart-centered and you want to make decisions from your heart that are going to be truly meaningful to you as a couple and make this a truly enjoyable experience. Another great one would be to be flexible. So there is such thing as being able to be decisive and flexible. I think knowing what's most important to you is the key to this. If you're trying to focus on every single one of those things and make them exactly so, even if they're not that important to you, the things that are actually important to you aren't going to have the energy, money, or focus that they need to turn out really great. So be intentional and just get in your planning state of mind. Decide who you want to be, who it's important to be, who you want to show up as, and I suggest reading them out loud and say, during my wedding planning process, I'm going to be organized, mindful, and flexible, or heart-centered, present, and excited. I don't know, whatever feels good to you. You can use my examples or you can come up with words of your own. So in the actual wedding planning binder, it's one of the first worksheets. So you'll kind of look over it really often throughout your wedding planning process so that you can remind yourself of who you want to be. You'll like, hey, this is who I am in this process, and you'll be able to actually bring that person to the table when you are making those important decisions. Another little side note here on getting in your planning state of mind, knowing who you want to be and who you want to show up as is very important, but also being in a great state of mind every time you go to do your wedding planning. So whether you need to go for a run outside or a walk, maybe you have a cup of coffee and maybe you meditate. I don't know, whatever makes you feel good and happy and you can clear out the stress of regular life is gonna make this so much more enjoyable for you, and you're gonna make the best decisions for you as a couple when you're not acting from a place of stress or chaos. So take these 3 things, review them often, especially when you're about to plan. And then also every time you're about to do any sort of wedding planning, make sure that you are in a great state of mind so that you can actually enjoy it and make the right decisions for you. All right, so for this next part, you might want to grab your partner to do this with us. If they're not available right now, that's totally fine. But you definitely want to have them complete this part of the worksheets so that you know that you both are on the same page. At the very least, review your worksheets with you so that you guys are on the same page about what you want here. I have a quick tip. Print out 2 copies of this first worksheet. So you fill out one and your partner fills out the other, and then you can combine them into one shared vision. I think so many people just assume they know what their partner wants, and what's actually true is every time, every bride I've worked with has been shocked and surprised by something that is important to their partner in the planning process that they did not expect. Like some little detail that's way more important to them than they would have ever known had they not done this or had they not asked. So highly recommend grabbing your partner to watch this video with you right now if they're available. If not, have them maybe watch it later, but definitely have them do these worksheets with you. All right, so the next thing we are going to figure out, we're getting to the wedding stuff, I promise. This stuff is just so important to have nailed down. before we start picking themes and that kind of stuff. So the next thing we're gonna talk about is, what is your why? What is the point of all of this for you? This is the most important question of figuring out the big picture of your wedding, figuring out the theme, the scheme, the feel. So let all the feels come up in this when you're filling this out. What is your why? Some questions to ask yourself, like as little prompts to figure it out, are: why are you marrying your fiance? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to celebrate it with your family and friends? Why are you having this wedding? Really reflect on your answers here and then get all the feels written out on this page. This is the secret key to really being able to have the wedding of your dreams. There's so much influence from other people, especially with social media, Pinterest and everything coming at us all the time, that we don't ever really take the time to sit and reflect, like, hey, what do I want? What do I want here? Why am I doing all of this? And if you don't know why you're doing all of this, that stuff isn't going to be reflected in the final outcome. So figure out like what's important to you. Why do you want to have your family there? And then why do you want to marry your partner? And so that those pieces can really come in throughout your wedding planning process and make it into the actual wedding so that it's actually meaningful and incredible in your dream day. So get that all written out. Make sure your partner does so as well. And then review this page often as well. I recommend doing it like once a month or anytime you're about to make a big planning decision, because the venue that you choose, the dress that you choose, the big details that you choose are going to be different if you are focusing on what's important to you or focusing on what everybody tells you should be important to you. And then making decisions from the place of why you're doing this and what's important to you is what's gonna bring it all together. It's what's gonna make this magical and special. All right, now that we have those important underlying tones of our wedding planning process, who we wanna be, who we wanna show up as we do this, and why we're doing all of this in the first place, now we can sit down and figure out the theme and the scheme and the vibe. So make sure you're thinking about your answers to these things from a place of why you're doing the wedding. The first thing we're gonna decide is the size. How many guests are you going to invite to your wedding? So this isn't about like how much you wanna spend or how many people can fit at your wedding venue. The number of guests you invite is going to impact the entire vibe of the big day. So if you're wanting something super intimate where you get to spend lots of time with each of the people at your wedding, then you're gonna want something a little bit smaller. Inviting 300 people to your wedding day, you're not gonna get that same like super intimate, deep, close time that you would if you invited, say, like 60. And then if maybe that's not super important to you, maybe you have a huge family and a big group of friends that you want to celebrate with everyone and you just want it to be this huge party, then having 60 people, it's possible to have that, but it's not gonna be the same vibe as inviting everyone who you want to be there and having maybe 200 guests or something. So the number of people you have there is really, really going to impact how the big day goes. So go back to your why, go back to like what you want your wedding day to feel like, what's important to you, and decide, do we want something more intimate and smaller? Do we want something in between? Or do we want this huge party? And then go ahead and write that on your worksheet. And then the next question is, what is the season? So what do you imagine the weather and the scenery being like on your wedding day? Do you imagine like sunshine and like a hot summer night, or maybe fall leaves, or maybe even snowflakes? What do you think? Don't put too much pressure on getting this right now. We are gonna go into a deeper process on figuring out how to pick your date, but it's good to know kind of like what is the high level scenery that you're looking for, and just go ahead and fill that in on your worksheet. The next thing you'll want to consider is, how formal is it? Are you wanting something super casual where people are in like maybe flip-flops and sundresses, or are you wanting something super formal where people are actually in evening gowns and tuxes? And then once again, go back to your why, go back to like what you want it to feel like, and make the decision from that place. What speaks to you most as a couple? Maybe you are a couple who feels really amazing when you get super dressed up and have a very formal party, or maybe you're a couple who feels so much more comfortable in a super casual vibe. What speaks to you as a couple? This is important because if you don't feel comfortable in like ultra formal wear and it's not really what you want, but you're just doing it because it's gonna, I don't know, look good on Instagram or you think you're supposed to do it, you're not going to be completely comfortable on your wedding day and you're not going to be able to completely enjoy it. So find what speaks to you most as a couple and go ahead and fill that in. So deciding this up front is really important too, because this is going to help you find all of your vendors. It's going to help you find your venue, most importantly. It's going to affect the wording on your invitations and everything like that. So it's super important to decide this up front. And then the next thing you want to consider is how traditional is your wedding? So this is different from formal. It's more like how much do you want to follow the wedding traditions? Maybe it's really important to you to be ultra traditional and get married in your church and do things exactly how the process is, and maybe that is meaningful and important to you. Or maybe that stuff doesn't really speak to you or makes you feel uncomfortable. Then you'll want to do something less traditional and maybe completely non-traditional. Just think about what feels most comfortable and what feels good to you and to your partner. And then go ahead and fill that in on your worksheet as well. So that will kind of help us figure out the vibe that we're going for, the high level vibe. And now considering all of your answers up until this point, we can describe what's the mood of your big day. What do you think about, like if you close your eyes and imagine that you're in the middle of your big day, you're maybe in the middle of, about to walk down the aisle or in the middle of your ceremony. What are you feeling? What are your guests feeling? Is it like a light, happy feel, or is it maybe intimate and romantic and like more of those like deep feels, or maybe it's a party vibe? What's the mood of your big day? So on the worksheet, I list out tons of options. So if any of those speak to you, you can just check them off. I would suggest choosing 2 to 3 here. And then if they don't, you can also add your own in the other section. So go ahead and decide what's the mood of your big day. And then the next part is the actual technical theme. Considering all of your answers up until this point, we're gonna choose what makes the most sense to go along with it. So which words describe the overall theme that you want to create throughout your big day? And then you'll choose 2 to 3 words here as well. And then once again, I have tons of examples on your worksheet that you can use, or if you have another idea, you can go ahead and add that in the other. And then once you have those, between the mood question and the theme question, you'll want to come up, kind of put the words together and come up with the theme for your big day. So some examples might be a rustic fairy tale theme, or boho chic, or crafty and charming, or simple and whimsical, or maybe a loving, regal affair. Just whatever, kind of play around with putting those words together until you come up with a theme that just feels really good to you. And now I know you might be like, oh my gosh, I can't decide, especially if you're somebody who considers themselves indecisive. But make a decision here. Just go ahead and go with what feels the best. If you had to make the decision right now, what would you choose? So throughout your wedding planning process, the theme and this vibe and stuff will kind of develop, and it might change a little bit, but you know what you want it to feel like. You know already what is the best theme for you. You can definitely make the decision right now. Don't put this off. Just make a decision. So you can totally revise it and add to it. It's not a big deal, but you need a starting place. If you have no idea what you're doing, going to try to book a venue or book any of your other vendors is going to be really frustrating and stressful and overwhelming because you don't actually know what you want. So go ahead and make a decision here so that you have a starting place, and then this can be revised and added to as you go. A quick tip here for you: do not pick your colors yet. I know one of the main questions you get asked about your wedding is, oh, what are your colors? But we don't want to do that quite yet. I recommend holding off on choosing your exact wedding colors until you have your venue booked, because making these little decisions like colors and stuff before you book your venue is going to make booking your venue harder. We want to have a clear vision and know what we want, and also have flexibility so that when it comes time to book a venue, we can make the right choice, and then we can make the little less important choices later on. Congratulations, you have a theme and scheme for your wedding. You have a starting place. So I'm gonna be working from my full wedding planning binder today. The worksheets that are included in the free worksheet downloads are all you need for this workshop right now. but I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because that is going to be the next thing that you'll want to do after you have set your foundations for your wedding. At this point, hundreds of brides have used my wedding planning binder to plan their weddings, and here's what a few of them are saying about it. Kelsey M says, I chose not to hire a wedding planner, which was a bit daunting at first once I realized how much effort goes into planning even a medium-sized wedding. This has been such a helpful resource for me in that it does a great job of breaking down seemingly overwhelming projects into manageable tasks. I'm much more confident in the entire process thanks to the insight I've gained, and as a result, my wedding planning experience has been truly enjoyable. And then Tiffany says, the prospect of planning a wedding was completely overwhelming to us, but this changed wedding planning from overwhelming and flustering to simple, streamlined, and organized. The checklists of things to do immediately organized and prioritized our wedding planning. The budget worksheets kept us on track, and we did not go a penny over our original budget. So this process that I've created, not only have I planned weddings as a wedding planner, but I have helped hundreds of brides kind of from afar through my YouTube channel and through my wedding planning binder. And I just want to stress the importance of getting organized and doing this stuff because it just helps you be able to actually enjoy the planning process. So I'll put the link to the wedding planning binder below. Go download it and add it to your wedding planning binder. And it's all in order by timeline, so you'll know that you're getting things done on time and you're not forgetting anything. Also, it's an instant download, so you can literally go get it right now, print it off, and start working on getting your wedding planning organized today. So now let's talk about the next biggest question that you get asked when people see that ring on your finger. When are you getting married? What is your wedding date? In this section, I'm gonna walk you through exactly how to pick the perfect wedding date. So a question I get asked a lot is, how much time do we actually need to plan our wedding? And the answer to that is, it depends. It totally depends on several factors. If you're wanting a bigger wedding with lots of details, it is gonna take longer. If you're wanting a smaller, more simple wedding, that's easier and quicker to plan. It depends on how big and how intricate you want your wedding details. And then also, it depends on your schedule. How much time do you have to spend on this? How much money do you have to spend on this? Because if you have more time and more money, then you can definitely get it done quicker. But if you are on a tighter budget or you just really don't have that much time to put in this, then you'll want to give yourself a little bit longer so that you're able to really create the wedding of your dreams on the budget that you have. So my recommendation is try to give yourself 1 year at least. It can definitely be done on a quicker timeline, so don't stress if you have less than a year, but the ideal amount of time to plan your wedding where you can really put a lot of time and energy into picking the little details and choosing what's right for you, the ideal time is 1 year. And then that is how my wedding planning binder is set up based on 12 months of planning, but you can also take longer or you can move through it a little bit quicker if you need to. So a few tips on picking your wedding date. So number 1, doing what's normal or on trend equals more expensive. If you want one of these really on trend fall weddings that are on a Saturday in October or in September, that is when the weather is perfect, and that's kind of what's really in right now and everybody's doing it. So that is going to be more costly than maybe doing a weekday or maybe choosing a little bit later in the year or a little bit earlier. My next wedding date picking tip is to be flexible. The more flexibility you can give yourself here, the better. And then my last tip is to start with a date range and keep your options open. So I know it's kind of false marketing. We're not gonna actually pick your wedding date here, but we are going to pick a date range that works best for you so that when you do go to look at venues, you know exactly what's gonna work and what's not going to work. And you have the flexibility to be able to make changes. So maybe you find a venue that's the venue of your dreams and it works perfectly. You'll have that flexibility in your date so that you can make it work for you. Especially if you're on a budget or maybe you are somebody who's planning their wedding in a quicker amount of time, having this flexibility is what's gonna get you the venue that you want. So I recommend choosing a season first, starting out with the season that you want, and you already wrote that down in one of our first questions. There are 6 other important factors that you need to consider when you're choosing a wedding date. Number 1 is vendor availability. If you are very specific about the vendors that you want, So like I mentioned, fall vendors are gonna be more expensive and less available. So if it is important to you to get married in the fall, starting as early as possible, booking those is going to be important. And then also considering having more of a budget might also be helpful if you are getting married in the fall. This is not as big of a factor if you feel really flexible on vendors. If you don't have your heart set on a certain photographer or a certain venue or something, then this might not actually impact you that much. But just be aware of the vendor availability in the season that you chose. The next factor that impacts it is cost and budget. How much do you have to spend on this wedding? If you're getting married in peak time, it's gonna be more expensive. If you're getting married on a Saturday, it's gonna be more expensive. So if you have a bigger budget, then this isn't an issue for you, but if you don't, then it's definitely something that you wanna consider when choosing your wedding date. The next thing you wanna consider is your schedules, you and your partner's schedules. When is a good time for you to get married? Depending on your work, there might be a time of year that's just really bad for you, like maybe you're an accountant, you don't wanna get married in tax season, it's gonna be not fun. Or maybe you're a teacher and you have the summers off, and so getting married in the summer would be perfect. Just think about like your schedule and your partner's schedule, and when would be just a really good time where you could be completely focused on the wedding and you don't have so many other things going on that are going to make it feel more chaotic and more overwhelming. The other thing you might want to consider is VIP schedules. So I never recommend trying to make your wedding date work for everybody. People are going to have to make it work if they want it to be there. There's just too many people involved and it's going to totally stress you out if you are trying to make it work for everyone. But you want to pick the people who are like vital that they're there, like your parents, your brothers and sisters, people like that, and consider their schedules as well. Maybe they have another wedding that they have to attend or something like that, or you have a family thing that's going on. You don't want to pick the same weekend as that stuff where your VIP is going to be able to make it to your wedding. So you might just want to ask them like, hey, is there any times that do not work for you at all? The next thing is season and weather. How do you imagine your wedding? Do you want it outdoors? Is it okay for you to have it indoors? What's the vibe of that? And then the last thing to consider are holidays. So if you are wanting to have a September wedding or maybe a May wedding, the little holidays that get forgotten about there are Labor Day and Memorial Day, and it is going to be more expensive for everyone to fly at that time, so more expensive for your guests to get there, more expensive hotels, and then just more expensive wedding in general. If that's okay with you, then that is totally fine, but it's something to consider. And then having your wedding on or around another holiday might make your attendance a little bit more limited than it would if you were not on a holiday. So just something to consider. Like I said, none of these things need to stress you out. They're just things you need to think about when you are choosing a date. You don't need to try to make it perfect. You don't need to have all of this stuff nailed down. Pick which factors are most important to you. Maybe you're having a super small intimate wedding, so some of these aren't even really going to impact you, but maybe it's really important to you to have a huge attendance at your wedding, so then you definitely want to consider some of these things when you are choosing your date. So decide what's important to you and then look at your schedules and come up with a date range that's going to work. So if you could just do a whole season, then that would be amazing, especially if it's far enough out that you don't really have stuff scheduled yet and you can schedule your life around it. That's ideal, because then you have the ultimate flexibility when you go venue shopping to be able to get the venue that you want at the price that you want. And then a pro tip here, do not pick that exact date until your venue is officially booked. That is what's going to pick your wedding date, and picking your date before that is gonna make it harder to find a venue. So let's not pick a date, but let's pick a few dates. So let's not pick a date, let's pick a couple of dates. Think about the season that you want and then all of those factors that I discussed in this section, and come up with a few dates that work for you so that you're prepared when you go to look at venues, you know what you're looking for. And then once you book that venue, then you can decide on your wedding date. But before we go start looking at venues, don't do it yet unless you already have, it's fine. But the next thing we need to do is part 3, the wedding budget. How much is this thing going to cost? So let's go through and calculate your full wedding budget, and then let's break it down by the different categories so you know exactly how much you can spend on each category so that you're actually going to hit your wedding budget. 3 quick tips for managing your wedding budget and not blowing it like everybody else does. Number 1, pick a comfortable number. Pick a number that feels good to you. Don't think about, what am I supposed to spend? How much do people usually spend? That's not gonna be right for every person. The median wedding cost is like $25,000. For some people, they're like, that would never pay for the wedding that I want. And for some people, they're like, I would never spend that on a wedding. So find something that feels good to you and really works for you as a couple. It's way more important to feel great about how much you're spending on your wedding than trying to keep up or trying to spend how much you're supposed to spend. Starting your marriage off on a great foot financially and without all of that like money, stress, and tension is gonna be way more worth it than a wedding that you can't afford. The next tip is you need to allocate specific amounts to each category. A lot of brides and grooms do actually set a total number and then they just start working from there, and they think they have so much to spend on each thing because usually it is a bigger number and you're like, how could it possibly cost that much? But then you go start booking things and it adds up way faster than you thought. So knowing how much you can spend in each thing is just so important, and I'm gonna talk to you more about how to do that in just a minute. And then the last tip is to track and adjust as you go. There are things that you might spend more money on than you originally anticipated, and that is totally fine as long as you go back through and reallocate your budget so that you're spending less in other areas. If you spend more on every single area, you're gonna end up tripling your wedding budget. So it's fine sometimes to go over on your budget, especially when it's an important detail to you, but you have to go back and pull that money from the other areas unless you're cool with doubling or tripling your wedding budget. And now a few tips on how to actually stay in your wedding budget once you decide on one. Number one, track everything. Little things add up so much here. There's so many little details that go into a wedding, and if you're not tracking those, they're gonna sneak up on you and surprise you and end up blowing your budget. Wedding budget tip number two, do not test drive the Porsche. Think about if you were out car shopping and you're in the market for like a really nice Honda or something. And you just go and you drive the new Honda and it feels so good because it's so much better than your old car and it has all the features that you want and you're super excited about it. Then you go ahead and just buy it. That's great. You're gonna be excited about it and you're gonna enjoy it. But if you go to the Porsche dealership and test drive the Porsche and see all the features and see how everything feels there, and you actually have a Honda budget, when you go into Honda and you start test driving those cars, they're just not gonna add up to what the Porsche was because the Porsche is so much more expensive. So that's the same with weddings. Do not go and look at venues or do not try on dresses that are way out of your budget, because when it comes time to like shop in your budget, you're gonna compare it to the things that are out of budget. But if you just stay in your budget in the first place, everything is actually gonna be great and beautiful and be what you need it to be. You just won't be comparing it to things that are out of your budget. And then my last tip to stay on your budget is to check in frequently. Anytime before you are shopping or going to book a vendor, you need to check in with your budget so that you know exactly how much you have to spend. Another like kind of secret tip, don't tell anybody I told you this, is to tell your vendors your budget is 5 to 10% less than it actually is. Now this isn't actually like lying, because a lot of vendors will take the budget that you gave them and work with that and not consider their service fees or tips and stuff like that. So your budget is actually a little bit less, but you want to give yourself some buffer and see what you can get for a little bit less amount before you start going right for your budget. Because I feel like it's basically the vendor's job to sell to you more. They make more money when you spend more money. So starting out a little bit lower gives you a little bit of wiggle room if you really want to try on the little bit more expensive dress, or you really want to go see the little bit more expensive venue, that's fine. But if you start at a little bit lower of an area, you'd be surprised that often you can find something that works for you, a package that works for you, a dress that works for you on a little bit lower of a budget, and that gives you more wiggle room in your other areas, and it also gives you the extra cash that you need for any service fees that might sneak up or tips. All right, so let's get those worksheets in front of you. The first thing we're going to do is create and allocate your budget. So on this worksheet, the first thing you need to figure out is who's contributing to the wedding and how much. That's how you're gonna know your total amount you have to spend. Do not make any assumptions here. If you are assuming your parents are gonna give you a ton of money and you just start spending from that point and they're like, wait, what? We did not say that. You're gonna get yourself in trouble and it's gonna be stressful. So have the conversations that you need to have with everyone contributing, get an exact number so that you can operate from a place of your exact budget so that you don't have that like financial stress and pressure. So go ahead and go to your worksheet and write in how much you and your partner are going to contribute to this. I have a video coming soon on how to figure this out and how to save up money for your wedding as well, so stay tuned for that. But for now, just how much do you think that you can consider? Maybe you go through and look at your monthly budget and see how much you can allocate monthly to this, or maybe you already have some savings set aside. Just pick a number that actually feels really comfortable, that is doable for you. The other ones are optional. Like, people might not actually be contributing to your wedding, and if they do contribute to your wedding, they're gonna have a little bit more say in it. So if you're willing to have some flexibility in return for people to contribute more money to your wedding, that's a choice that you get to make, but you need to make that choice. You need to be intentional about that decision as well. So find out how much your parents are going to contribute to this, how much your groom or maybe your bride's parents are going to contribute to this. And then if you have anybody else, maybe you have aunts who want to contribute, grandparents, stuff like that, make sure you have those conversations and figure out the exact amount. And then once you've had those conversations and you have the exact amount, then you will have your total wedding budget. Don't stop here. If you stop here, you're gonna end up blowing that. So make sure you move on with me. Let's move on to the next worksheet. And then once again, all of these worksheets are included in that free worksheet download that I mentioned at the beginning. The link is in the description below. There's literally no reason you should not have these worksheets in front of you. Make sure you do this. So the next worksheet is going to be allocating your budget. So I have suggested and typical percentages here for you. So you'll take your total budget. So for instance, coordination, I suggest about 5%. So take your total budget times 0.05 and write that number down, and then do the same for each of the categories. I recommend doing my suggested ones first, and then you can go through and maybe your dress came out to way less than you anticipated spending on your dress, so you can grab some money from another category that's less important to you and put it there. But it's really important that you make sure that you are pulling money from the other areas, or maybe you find out that you need to add more money to your wedding budget. You need to figure that out separately so that you can make your budget work. The key to making this as low stress and like not overwhelming as possible is to just make these decisions and stick to them. So that I have 2 pages for you on allocating your budget. So the first one, you can get it really messy, cross things out, write things in, figure it out, and then I have 1 more page for you so that you can write it all out so it's nice and pretty, so you know exactly how much you have to spend on each category. And then along with this, if you already booked things, make sure you're putting that as your budget, and you need to pull money from the other areas, or you can add money back to other areas if you were under budget. But make sure you put the real numbers in if you've already spent it, because that's gonna be your budget. And then the last part of the worksheets is the budget tracker. So this is gonna help you break down each category into more specific detail, so that you know how much you have to spend and how much you've actually spent for each thing. If you go over on any of your budgets, that's fine. You just need to go back and figure out where that money is coming from, whether that's from another category or you're gonna add more to your wedding budget. But don't blow it off, because then you'll end up needing to add a lot of money to your wedding budget. So now we have a goal that we're working towards. We know what's important to us. We have a date range, possibilities of dates that are gonna actually work for you so you can start that venue shopping. And we have, most importantly, a budget. So what's next? So now it's time to start booking your vendors. But before you do that, I highly recommend grabbing my complete binder. So you already have a head start on it. You already did these free worksheets. And so you already basically started your wedding binder. Punch them together, put them in there. But you'll wanna grab the rest of the binder, because all of these worksheets are gonna walk you through in all the detail that I discussed today, how to do that for each vendor, the questions to ask. So for instance, the next worksheet in the binder is the venue research worksheet. So what are our requirements for location, capacity, what do we want it to be like, what's our venue budget, and it just walks you through all of that, and then it walks you through doing the research on your potential venues, so you know what you're looking for and you're not gonna waste your time looking at venues that aren't gonna work for you. Then it also has the questions to ask your potential venues. So when you are touring those venues, you know exactly what you need to be asking and you're not gonna miss any details. You're going to actually be able to book the venue and these different vendors that are actually right for you and stick to your vision that you created in this workshop. So I'll put the link to the wedding planning binder below. Go download it and add it to your wedding planning binder, and then it's time to start booking your wedding vendors. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your other friends who are engaged. Also, if you have any questions, go ahead and leave those in the comments. I'm so excited for you. I think the wedding planning process is going to be so much more enjoyable for you now that you've completed this workshop. You'll really be able to create the wedding of your dreams now that you know what you want. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Happy planning!
I watch you as you drive. Do you know I'm looking? And I can't help but smile. Do you know how much I love you? You put my favorite song on, I put my feet up, and we just sing along. And I can't help but feeling, just loving this moment. Can we stay here forever? I'm loving this moment. Can we stay here together? If I could stop the